Brothers and sisters in faith, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Assalamu alaikum, Namaste, Ji Ayanu, and welcome everyone. On behalf of the Sikh Council for Interfaith Relations, it is my pleasure to welcome each and every one of you on Zoom as well as Facebook Live. I am Dr. Tarunjit Singh Butalia and I serve as a founding trustee of SCIR, or the Council. SCIR was formed 7 years ago as a result of several Sikh volunteers coming together to plan for the Sikh participation at the 2015 Parliament of the World Religions in Salt Lake City. We as an organization have also been privileged to work on the Sikh participation at the 2018 Parliament of the World Religions in Toronto, as well as the virtual parliament that was held last year. SCIR is a proud member of Religions for Peace USA, as well as the North American Interfaith Network. We are currently engaged in 2 bilateral ongoing interreligious dialogues. The first one is the Catholic-Sikh dialogue, which is hosted by SCIR in collaboration with the US Conference of Catholic Bishops. And the second one, the second national interreligious dialogue, is the Sikh Christian dialogue, which is hosted by SCIR in collaboration with the National Council of Churches here in the United States. More information on these and other initiatives of the Council are available at our Facebook page, a link of which has been sent to you in the chat box. Every other month, SCIR has decided to hold webinars which promote interfaith understanding and dialogue among our many diverse religious communities. This is our first such webinar and is on a topic that comes at a moment of intense joy and intense pain for others. On August 14th and 15th of this year, when India and Pakistan celebrated their 75th anniversary of independence, many Punjabis, Muslims, Sikhs, and Hindus are reminded of the day the land of the 5 rivers was divided and partitioned. Who would want to celebrate the division of their own homeland? It is a question we must ask ourselves. How should we observe this anniversary on which we were separated from so much of our heritage on the other side? The title of today's webinar is 75th Anniversary of the Partition of Punjab, Multi-Faith Voices of Past, Present, and the Future. Our conversation today, as you all probably are aware, is not an easy one. How the partition of South Asian region of Punjab in 1947 has impacted the lives of Muslims, Hindus, and Sikhs, as well as the lessons it holds for us today, will be the focus of our conversation. We have a panel of multi-faith voices from Lahore in Pakistan and Amritsar in India, 2 twin cities, physically very close to each other, but culturally separated for 75 years now. We also hope to be joined by a survivor of the partition who lives now in California and is having some technical difficulties to join us. Friends, before we proceed further, what I would like to do is we have some opening polls for all of us to work through so we get to know each other. And so I will first do the polls and then I will invite our speakers to begin their opening remarks. And this poll will only work for those of us who are on Zoom. It will not work on Facebook. So here we go. Please choose what part of the world you are calling in from today. And once I have 80% people responded, I will then go ahead and share the results with all of you. It'll give us a sense of the community that has gathered here today. Everyone is requested to kindly go ahead and make their selections. We are at about 70% right now. Okay, I will go ahead now and share the results. As you can see on your screen, about 3/4 of our audience today, about 70% is from US and Canada, about 15% from India, about 10% from Pakistan, about 3% from Europe, and a few others. So it gives us a sense of where we all are coming from. I will now go to our second poll, which looks at what faith traditions are represented here today. Kindly make your choice. We had over 180 people register for our webinar today. So thank you everyone for joining. In today's webinar, we have about 12% Muslims, 76% Sikhs, 6% Hindus, 3% Christians, and 3% approximately of those who don't have any particular faith affiliation. I will next go to the survey, which is on gender. Kindly make your choice. That is wonderful. I think we have a very healthy balance of 60% male and 40% female attendance on today's webinar. Two more polls to go quickly. Our next poll is interesting because before the partition in 1947, many of our ancestors could read Punjabi both in Gurmukhi and in Shamukhi. Since the partition, many of us who were born after partition can only read one or the other. Or some might be able to speak Punjabi but cannot read Gurmukhi or Shamukhi. So kindly make your choices. You can only choose one. I'm ending the polls now, and here are the results on your screen. About 1/4 of our attendees today can both read Gurmukhi and Shamukhi. What that tells me is that those attendees are either individuals who were there before partition and are survivors of the partition, and or have learned the other language after the partition occurred. There are about half who can only read Gurmukhi, about 3% who can only read Shamukhi. And this is surprising that we have about 1/4 of our audience here who can speak Punjabi, but they can neither read Gurmukhi or Shamukhi. It talks to the kind of development that we need to do as communities to be able to work together. And now I would like to do our last poll at the beginning here. And as you can see, with each opportunity, the polls get more difficult. And this one, I will say, will be challenging. In this poll, you can choose more than one option. And if you think that statement applies to you, you can, so you don't have to choose one option, you can choose multiple options. And I'll give a little more time for this, and then we will unpack some of what we are hearing from you. And as our panelists speak, they will also reflect on some of the things that you are choosing when we see the results. We want at least 80% participation in this one last poll before I introduce our speakers. We only have about 70% of our speakers have responded as yet. So I would call upon everyone to do their best and respond, please. And you can choose any of the choices that apply to you. Okay, so I will go ahead and end the poll, and here are the results. About 15% of our attendees today themselves have experienced the partition. 80% of our attendees today have had someone in the family who has experienced partition. About 1/4 of our attendees today lost a family member in the partition. About 10% have connected with or have had the opportunity to visit the ancestral home on the other side of their family, while 33%, 3 times those, have not done that, not had the opportunity to do it, and look forward to that. Nobody here felt that their pain of the parliament does not allow them to relate to others. And about 1/3 of our attendees feel that they have been able to heal from the partition and can relate to people across the border. Let's take a moment to reflect on the pain and the joy and everything else that we bring to this table together. At this time, I would like to request our first speaker, Dr. Akhtar Hussain, to kindly come on camera and unmute himself while I introduce him. Our first speaker is Dr. Akhtar Hussein Sandhu. He is the principal at Government Islamia College Civil Lines in Lahore, which was the DAV College in Lahore before 1947. And his campus still contains the samads of some of the queens of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. He is the author of the book, Punjab, An Anatomy of Muslim Sikh Politics. I welcome Dr. Sandhu and turn the floor over to him. And while he's speaking, in the chat box, I will put a link to the book that he has on Amazon that I understand Dr. Sandhu was on the basis of your PhD degree. Is that correct, brother? Dr. Akhtar Hussain Sandhu.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you very much, Professor Batalia, Dr. Sandhu, Manish, and other participants. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to the prestigious participants. I have 2 parts of my presentation. First, a pre-partition harmony, a communal harmony in Punjab, and the second would be the problematic areas which resulted in the massacre or killing of each other. So first of all, I want to clear the situation that these narratives are based on oral accounts. I collected through interviews or field survey from India, UK, and Pakistan. So my presentation is based on oral history accounts. So first, quickly coming to the topic, communal harmony in Punjab, especially I'm talking about causes of communal harmony in Punjab. So the first cause was bravery or capaciousness of Punjab. Punjab is a land of 5 years and land of brave people, and province believes in capaciousness and they accept others, they respect the otherness of others, they respect the other opinion. And even today, Punjab is a center where every person belonging to different sub-nationalism can come here, and they can enjoy the life and friendly living with the Punjabis. Punjabi don't raise any question about that. So Punjabi has sustained the same tradition. The second is saintly heritage, or legacy of their teachings, saintly heritage. And we know that Punjabi classical literature is very rich literature, and there is a creator, creature, love, fraternity, friendliness. All these are involved in the literature, classical literature. And Waris Shah, Baba Nanak, Mia Muhammad Baksh, Bule Shah, and all these people have educated the people to live with harmony and to live with love with other people. So the second is conversion within caste. It was blessing. Some people say that it's not blessing, but according to my analysis, it is blessing to see the people who accepted Christianity, who accepted Islam, and who became Sikhs. Although this, the main folk came from Hindus, but it was a blessing to see the conversion within caste. For example, if I'm Sandhu Jat, so definitely there are Sikh Sandhus, there are Hindu Sandhus, and there are some. So race or blood was the same, and they had separated from the main folk, religious folk, but still they had very good relations and love for their caste fellows. So this was the conversion within caste. The third was communitarian dominance. Majority is always dominant in all kind of ethos and other traditions of the society. For example, if we come to the western part of Punjab, there was a majority of the Muslims, and minority were the Sikhs and Hindus. And in some domains, they had to adopt some ethics of the Muslims. For example, if some people are living in eastern part, for some Muslim is living in eastern part of the Punjab, so definitely when he will interact with the other non-Muslims or Sikhs, so definitely he will say Sat Sri Akal, Namaskar, or Namaste. So actually, to go to the mainstream of the society, he will have to adopt the ethos or the styles of the majority. So it was an open decision, natural decision or divide, that communitarian dominance was there, and the poor or minority had accepted the authority of the dominant community. So the Punjabis had learned how to live peacefully and with harmony. The next is interdependence. The people were together in cultivation, profession, in business, in playgrounds, and they were not independent, but they were interdependent on each other. They needed the help of the neighbors. They needed the help of the other partners. So definitely the interdependence created a society of harmony and friendly relations with each other. The next is a panchayat system, the village administrative system. It was just like today's judiciary, but the result is not like that, because in panchayat system, everybody was impartial and they were making decisions justly and in friendly way, and there was a quick justice was being imparted to the parties. And interestingly, both the parties were happy on the decision made by the panchayat system. So panchayat system was to resolve the problems. Today's judiciary is to create the problems, but that panchayat system was to solve the problems of the people. So if there was any problem, even communal problem between the two communities, so matter was being taken to the panchayat. Immediately it was decided, and it was dissolved. And the next was the lack of publishing activities. So we know that publishing activities came with the British, but in the rural Punjab, that was the real Punjab. I do consider that the rural Punjab was the real Punjab, and it was the hub of the culture. And the lack of the publishing activities was blessing for the Punjabis. Because if there was in cities or in urban areas, if there is some very trivial incident, but it was highlighted in the newspapers or through the media, publishing activities or newspapers. So it was taken to one street to another immediately, and it was even the simple political matter was religionized, and religious matter was politicized. So this practice created problem in the urban areas, but because of the lack of the publishing activities, rural areas was immune to all these the infections or the infectious activities. So if some communal problem came to fore, it was immediately taken up by the panchayat and it was dissolved, and it did not travel from one village to another. So the lack of publishing activities, the absence of the publishing activities were blessing for the peaceful Punjab. Then there was a pure nature of friendship. For example, if we say the exchange of pag vatana. So one Muslim or Sikhs or Hindus or Christians, all the Punjabis had a relationship with other Punjabis, and some people exchanged their pags or turbans, and it was a symbol that they had deep relations with each other, and it was more than the blood relations. And we have witnessed during the partition of Punjab, we have watched so many movies and documentaries and so many novels that there was a big cooperation because of this relationship on the basis of caste. Jats, they cooperated with the Jats, and the people who had very good relations with the friends, and they helped out the families, whether they were Sikhs or Muslims. All the Punjabis imparted or rendered cooperation for. Then folklore or mela, annual fairs, then games, then deras, and Heer Waris Shahs, singing, Damal, and all these created a friendly environment in Punjab, and Punjabi enjoyed very friendly relationship in the pre-partition Punjab. And still, these are the symbols, and this is the heritage of the Punjabis, that still we are together, and we always love to be together. So I think that I had only 10 minutes to go, so I am unable to talk about the second part of my presentation, and my time is over. Thank you very much.
Akhtar Virji, you can go ahead and maybe talk for a minute or two about what do you see as the future?
Okay, if you allow me, thank you very much. So actually the problematic areas where the first was divide on religious basis. British came here and divide and rule. I have talked a lot, and my article is available on Google, that there was no British conspiracy of divide and rule in India. But before the advent of the British, these communities were already divided on religious basis. Muslims were Muslims, and Sikhs were Sikhs, and Hindus were Hindus. So they were already divided on religious basis. And unfortunately, they formed when democracy was introduced by the British. So they founded their political parties on the basis of their religion. And we see that Indian National Congress dominated by Hindus, and then Muslim League, purely Muslims, and then Khalsa National Party. Then we see that Shiromani Akali Dal, that this is the religious. So all these mainstream political parties were formed on the basis of religion dominantly. So this was a big divide.
I apologize. My question is, could you talk about the future now? Where do we go from here? That's really, I think, what our attendees would want to know, that we've had a painful and long history as Punjabis. Where do we need to go here? Could you talk a little bit about that? Thank you.
So just 1 minute, that I conclude that both the parties are, all the Punjabis think that the killing or massacre of 1947 was a madness of the time. And nobody is going to justify that killing. This is a good and positive sign that all the Punjabis, whenever they meet, then they talk and they publish, they think that that was a mad activity, and nobody is going to justify that killing. One thing. And this is a positive sign, and it has eliminated the antagonistic or some kind of these elements from the Punjabi minds. And now they are working for mother tongue Punjabi. They want to serve as Punjabi. And the social medias have created a new phase of Punjabi nationalism. So we are now, all the Punjabis living in all the parts of the world, they are together, they are united to serve mother tongue Punjabi, and they are to promote Punjabi nationalism. And once again, the classical literature, what we have, the roots, they have told us, they have educated us to be united as a Punjabi, and still we are, and the future is very bright, and we are heading towards a bright future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Akhtar Sandhu. I appreciate you bringing this perspective from the immense work that you have done. It is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Ranbir Singh Sandhu, who is on the phone with us. He was unable to connect with us. And so at this time, I have given Dr. Sandhu the permission to speak. All that he needs to do is unmute his phone. And while he's doing that, I should say that you can see our first panelist and a second panelist share the same last name. So we have much more in common than in difference. And Dr. Ranbir Singh Sandhu, if you could kindly unmute your phone while I introduce you, I would appreciate that. Dr. Ranbir Singh Sandhu is Professor Emeritus at The Ohio State University. He himself has been a survivor of the partition. He is an author of the book Struggle for Justice, a link to which I will put in the chat box, and was and is an active interfaith pioneer student at what was then the McLeod Engineering College at the time of partition. I would like to welcome Dr. Ranbir Singh Sandhu, and you are ready to speak.
This is Ranbir Singh Sandhu, and I hope people can hear me. I enjoyed Dr. Hussein Sandu's presentation, and I learned a lot from what he told us. And I agree with him that the partition of Punjab was a period of mob madness, massacres, and lifelong misery all around. However, there was goodwill and friendliness, kindness also. Bad people did bad things, and good people did good. Goodness eventually prevails, and did this time too. I was a student at the Punjab College of Engineering at that time, and I must explain to you that I was born in Lalpur. I grew up in Mianwali, and I had a lot of Muslim friends. I'll tell you some stories from personal experience of goodwill and kindness on both sides. and my later interaction with Muslim friends from Pakistan and elsewhere. In Lahore, riots started very soon after Sardar Khizr Khan resigned. And it so happened that he resigned on the 3rd of March. On the 5th of March, I was one of the people injured and taken to the hospital because of the riots. I survived, and we had several months of tension and sporadic murders. And then at the end of our exams, I and my brother left Lahore on July 12th, and I'll show you an example of what happened. We came to Hoshiarpur, that's our hometown, and when we reached the railway station, it was deserted. There was no help available to take our bags home. So we decided that we'll carry one bag at a time and maybe make some trips back and forth. On the way, we were stopped by a group of young Muslims, and they asked us, what are you doing there? And it so happened that one of them was an old friend. His name was Ghafoor. He saw us. I said, what are you doing here? And we told him that we are trying to get back home, and the stuff is at the railway station. All those boys, about 20 of them, they went with us back to the station, picked up our bags, and took their tour to our home. What had happened was that while we were in Lahore, exodus from East Punjab to West and West to East has started, and our mahalla, the area where we lived in, was now declared a Muslim refugee camp, where people were assembling to be transported to Pakistan. So we were one Sikh family living in large number of Muslims. We were not afraid. We knew they were our friends. Most of them were our neighbors and helpers. A lot of people from our village came and stayed in that area. And so everything went nice. In fact, in September 47, there were very heavy rains in Punjab, and they caused deaths of thousands of refugees camping on the banks of streams and rivers. In our neighborhood, the roof of a house collapsed around midnight of 25th September. And I recall I and my brother went to the house to rescue the people, fully or partially buried. After some time, our Muslim friends came over and they took charge. Again, during this partition, there was a Muslim lady who used to help our mother on various projects. She had a son and a daughter, both in their 20s. After permission of Pakistan was announced, the son had gone to Lahore to look for a job. And as Muslims moved to refugee camps, these two ladies, mother and daughter, didn't have anywhere to go. So my mother asked them to come and be with us. One of our neighbors, Muslim neighbors, has left, and he had left his house in our custody. So our mother told them to live there till we were able to find the son and reunite them. And this was hard at that time, but my father knew Khan Bahadur Ahmad Hassan Khan, who was our current Prime Minister Imran Khan's Nana, and they worked together, my father and he. So he wrote to him about our problem, and with his help, the boy was found and the family was reunited. After partition, a long time passed, and I went to England to do my master's, and there I met a Muslim boy from Pakistan. He was at the London School of Economics, and I was at the University of Sheffield. But distance didn't matter. We became lifelong friends. It so happened that after we returned to our own countries, we met again in Berkeley, where both of us had gone for our PhDs. And that was great. This time he was married, and we had very good time in Berkeley, and we've been lifelong friends. Then we had 2 class reunions. I attended the one in Pakistan. It was 7 days of total celebration. Our Pakistani friends facilitated our visits all over Punjab and even provided cars and drivers for our personal trips. There were lavish receptions at Pakistan Institute of Engineers, where we were made members of the institute, and at the Engineering University, hosted by the Vice Chancellor. We found that restaurants won't let us pay for food. The car mechanics, they won't take any money. And we were overwhelmed by love and friendship. During our visit, I and my wife went to the Chuck where her father and grandfather had lived. We received a lot of love from the people. We were delighted to learn that after partition, 2 villages had sprung up in that land, and the locals named them Fort Ajab Singh and Ram Singh Wala in respect of the Sardars. In the USA, I came here in 1965, did my PhD, and then started as a professor at Ohio State University. I was fond of doing research and had 17 PhDs students. At least 7 of them were Muslims. And I love them, and I'm grateful for their respect. To the end, I'd like to thank the Sikh Council of Interfaith Relations for having this get-together. I think this bodes good for all of us to work together, understand each other, and in Dr. Iqbal's words, "Mazhab nahi sikhata, aapas mein bair rakhna." So we have to learn from our elders and do that. And thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ranbir Singh Sandhu, for your very kind words and sharing with us your experiences. I noted that I did not hear an iota of anger in your voice. I only heard compassion and gratitude. And please stay with us for the rest of the program, because we also want you to be part of the Q&A that happens as we go along. So please kindly stay with us. I will now move on to our third panelist, and he's requested to come on and unmute himself while I introduce him. This is Professor Munich Singh, and he lives in a city right across the border from where Dr. Akhtar Sandhu is. He's from Lahore, and Munich is a professor, associate professor in the postgraduate department of history at DAV College in Amritsar. As I said earlier, our first panelist is at the place that was called DAV College, Lahore. and he is the moderator of the Facebook heritage group Punjab Heritage that currently has about 140,000 members. Manish Singhji, the floor is yours.
I would like to thank Dr. Taranjit Singh Butalia, Sikh Council for Interfaith Relations for inviting me. कुछ ऐसे भी पल गुजरे हैं तरीके इंसानी में, लम्हों ने खता की है, सदियों ने सजा पाई. I will mainly talk on how a peaceful, joyous atmosphere turned into people suffering, a painful separation during partition. The partition of India into two countries, India and Pakistan, in 1947 is without any doubt the most catastrophic event that has taken place in contemporary history. In terms of its scale, its wide-ranging impact, and its many resonances and ramifications. In the lives of Indians today, the partition remains singularly important. Just the bare statistics are staggering. Roughly 10 to 12 million people are said to have moved within the space of a few months between India and Pakistan. As we know, in India's freedom struggle, Punjab contributed the most, hanging on the gallows, enduring the torture of Kala Pani, and making countless other sacrifices that are very difficult to describe in words. But when independence was being celebrated at the Red Fort in Delhi on August 15, bloodshed was being played out in Punjab. The cost of the freedom of India was heavily paid by Punjabis. The communal frenzies not only killed thousands of innocent people, but it also uprooted and displaced them from their traditional homeland. Punjab, which is often called the land of gurus and peers, was once the center of the Buddhism, Bhakti movement, Sufis, and Guru Nanak Sahib. All of them spread their messages about love, peace, and brotherhood. The partition of Punjab destroyed this 1,000 years old brotherhood. If I talk about earlier decades, there was perfect harmony between Hindu, Sikhs, and Muslims. Their houses or mohallas were adjoining each other. Both communities gave due respect to each other. There was no history of Hindu-Muslim riots in most of the cities. Before 1947, Hindu Muslims participated in the freedom movement together. 2019 marked the 100-year commemoration of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. In 1919, Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims raised their voices against the British government in Amritsar at Jallianwala Bagh. They had water from the same pot. There was a famous slogan during that time, Hindu-Muslim Ekta Jindabad. This unity may also have been one of the reasons for their demise at Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Recently, a film star, Deepti Nawal, wrote a book titled A Country Called Childhood, a Memoir, has been published. She writes, my father told me that on 9th April 1919, there was a jalsa in Hal Bazaar in which 20 people were killed by the British. The dead bodies were brought into the Khairuddin Mosque and were bathed here at the pond. They were Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims. Then their funeral procession were carried out in the mosque together. This is the best example of mutual brotherhood. One more example is, I interviewed Advocate Sudarshan Kapoor in Amritsar. He told me that I fondly remember the prayer that we used to recite in the morning every day in the school before start of the classwork. It is famous poem written by Dr. Muhammad Iqbal. लब पे आती है दुआ बन के तमन्ना मेरी, जिंदगी शम्मा की सूरत हो खुदाया मेरी, दूर दुनिया का मेरे दम से अंधेरा हो जाए, हर जगह मेरे चमकने से उजाला हो जाए. The poem was wonderful. It did not have any touch of religion. It was considered the best prayer for the children. I have done many interviews in Amritsar which testify this brotherhood despite the communal air blowing across the Punjab on the eve of the partitions. Feeling of centuries-old sense of brotherhood was still prevalent. People staked their lives for humanism. In certain villages, the Muslims defended the Sikhs and Hindus and provided them shelter, whereas in other areas, they failed to do so. One fails to understand this secret of nature, what to talk of human intelligence. In a Muslim-dominated village, the Muslim notables got together and took oath on Quran that they would not allow anyone to touch the non-Muslims of their village. They promised to defend them at the stake of their lives. Similarly, the Sikhs promised the Muslims same. During separation, people expressed their pain and pangs. They swore by their God to meet again. Some wept like kids unabruptly. The refugee prayed to the God that their defenders must be paid back for taking risks to save the innocent lives. At times, the defenders had to risk their lives. Often, the plunderers would shout back, "Get off our way, otherwise you would also be gunned down." Plunderers were pleaded to leave ladies and children apart for the sake of God, but none would listen. Such were the days. Perhaps they had got hearts of hard metals. For the refugees, the people had opened up their hearts. They were served and cared much. In Amritsar, women had much consideration for the refugees. They cooked and served the food for the refugees. People took their meals only after they had served, even before the downed refugees would rush to bazaars and streets to ask for bread and pickle. By now, people had habit of cooking more. Within no time, entire Parikrama of Sri Darbar Sahib, Guru Ramdas Sarai, and entire the Jallianwala Bagh used to be jammed by refugees. Large number of relief committees and help counters were open. Sometimes reliefs in food would extend the demand. Similarly, in Lahore city, the food would come from different mohallas, such as Krishna Nagar, Ramnagar, and Shalti. Despite these adversities, people continuously remembered their past. Harjeet Kaur, an eyewitness, told me she remembered how Maulvi used to perform mantra to get rid of certain skin disease her children were suffering from. The Maulvis used to do rituals called Chad Fook for fever. The people discussed common customs, common religions, places, common festivals, common songs, language, and common dress and belongingness between Hindus and Muslims. One woman confessed how she had adopted a Muslim girl as her daughter. He would pay for her clothing and arrange her marriage with pomp and show. Khalid Chima, a former bureaucrat, was interviewed by Citizens Archive of Pakistan. Mr. Chima said that it is the fact of the whole process of partition that he considers important. We had very friendly relations with Hindus and Sikhs, and families used to go out together on picnics. In Lahore, we used to visit each other for a whole day. That was the pattern in those days. No short, quick visits. He also recently came across some of his father's papers, which included a letter from one of his friends discussing intimate family matters with his father. It was not only in school, but on SCIR too, that Hindus and Muslims ate together. I was in the Boy Scouts and we used to go out on camps. All the boys had to cook by turn and everyone ate what was cooked. Our scout master was a Brahmin. He used to eat with us. He adds how religion never mattered. Even when a new boy joined school, concerns were more about how would mingle with everyone. If he would be a good team member, the biggest loss for Mr. Chima has been destruction of a cosmopolitan, multi-religious, forward-looking pluralist society. I think the word is proper because of that, he says. What is his wife, Nasreen, 75 years, a former teacher, remembers best in her feisty mother, Rashida Ehsan, a classmate of Johra Segal. My mother was a great activist who had Hindu and Sikh friends. She spoke highly of her teachers, Sarojini Naidu's daughter, and Miss Jutsi, Nehru's cousin. After college, Miss Naidu held meeting at her residence to discuss the independence struggle. My mother, who otherwise observed Parda, would mingle with Hindus and young people of all faiths. These were secret meetings, she says. When Bhagat Singh was tried and sentenced, Miss Ehsan and other friends wrote packed in blood to protest, but they were not allowed to carry out demonstrations. Her uncle, who was a magistrate, said he would get the placards distributed in public. That was the spirit of Bhagat Singh. Miss Chima says her mother once led a procession to the house of the divisional commissioner, a Sikh who knew her family. He refused to arrest her for violating prohibitory orders, saying his conscience would not permit him to do the same. Her house was like a refugee camp in those days, spilling over with women looking for lost children. Massacre is one thing, and being separated from your family is another. Miss Chima says, if the massacres had not happened, then this migration would not have taken place. We would still be a plural, diverse, and tolerant society. We are now intolerant, sectarian, and we are going through hell. I don't know how it will all end. Gunita Singh Bhalas started 1947 Partition Archive in 2013 and preserved memories of those who witnessed the 1947 partition in South Asia. Recently, her team completed 10,500 stories. Punjabi Lehar, under the leadership of Nasser Tillo and Lovely Singh, is doing the same in Pakistan. And many more individuals, institutions have preserved these narratives. While history books debate the political reasons for partition, attempts at writing a social history are relatively recent. Feminist historiographers like Ritu Menon, Kamla Basin, and Urvashi Butalia were some of the first to attempt such a history, where they tried to write women's experiences of partition back into the archive by recording and analyzing oral history in Borders and Boundaries and the Other Side of Silence, respectively.
Munish, can you wrap up, please? Thank you so much. Could you come to your closing comments, please? I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Sir, I want to close or summarize with the few lines from Ustad Daman's famous poem. Is mulk di wand kolo yaro, khoye tusi vi ho, khoye asi vi haan. Bhave mੂੰਹੋਂ ਨਾ ਕਹੀਏ ਪਰ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਖੋਏ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹੋ, ਖੋਏ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹਾਂ. ਇਹਨਾਂ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀਆਂ ਹੱਥੋਂ ਬਰਬਾਦ ਹੋਣਾ, ਖੋਏ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹੋ, ਖੋਏ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹਾਂ. ਕੁਝ ਉਮੀਦ ਹੈ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਮਿਲ ਜਾਏਗੀ, ਮੋਏ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹੋ, ਮੋਏ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹਾਂ. ਜਿਉਂਦੀ ਜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੌਤ ਦੇ ਮੂੰਹ ਅੰਦਰ, ਢੋਏ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹੋ, ਢੋਏ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹਾਂ. ਜਾਗਣ ਵਾਲਿਆ ਰੱਜ ਕੇ ਲੁੱਟਿਆ ਏ, ਸੋਏ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹੋ, ਸੋਏ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹਾਂ. ਲਾਲੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਪਈ ਦੱਸਦੀ ਏ, ਰੋਏ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹੋ, roye ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਹਾਂ. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ji. Ji, for those who don't know what Munish has shared, the last lines of this poem talk about saying that the redness of your eyes and the redness of our eyes both tell us that you have cried and we have cried. Thank you, Virji, for sharing your poignant comments with us. At this time, I would request everyone who has a question to type in the Q&A box, and we will focus primarily during the Q&A on looking forward now, rather than looking back. We've had several presentations on what happened at that time, what were the causes, and now we want to look forward to move the conversation along. I will bring a poll on the screen, and after the poll is done, I will share the results, and I will first invite all our panelists to kind of respond to the poll results that you see. There are many ways that the divide of the last 35 years can be healed. What you will see on your screen are some, about 10 options that I chose of things that would be done over the next 10 years to provide more healing for what the separation of the last 75 years. You are requested to choose any 5 of these that you think would contribute towards bringing people from both sides together. And here, Charda Punjab means the direction from which the sun rises, which is east or Indian Punjab. And Lenda means the direction in which the sun goes down, which would be West Punjab or Pakistani Punjab. So please go ahead and make your choices. And once I have the results, I will bring the total of 10. So if you go a little further down and scroll down the poll, you will also see the other 3 that are at the bottom, and everyone is requested to choose no more than 5. I know that Dr. Ranbir Singh Sandhu can see it. So when I talk about the results, I will speak out. And also those who are on Facebook Live, I see a friend of mine who has joined us from Malaysia there. I will read out those and tell you how many % think this needs to be done. So Dr. Sandhu, we will read it out once we have the results. Only about 20% have participated. And now I'm going to keep quiet for a couple of minutes while you have a chance to respond to what you think are future healing opportunities. I'm about to end the poll. So if those of you who still want to make some choices, you are welcome to do that. I'll give about a minute more, and then I will share the results so Dr. Ranbir Singh Sandhu can hear them, as well as those who are joining us through Facebook Live cannot see on the screen, but be able to hear the collective input from all of us. As part of this is a process, right, where we learn from one another. Each of our speakers provided many perspectives that each of us learned from. And now this is the place where we can all kind of learn from each other. So I am ending the poll, and here are the results. I'll first cover the items which have more than 50% of people in attendance feel should be done over the next 10 years. The first one, in no particular order, more than 50%, is learning Shahmukhi for Gurumukhi writers and Gurumukhi for Shahmukhi writers, 55%. There is an organization, Jeevay Sanjha Punjab, that is currently doing these classes, and I think Pargat Virji is here. He can go ahead and maybe type up the website of Jeevay Sanjha Punjab. That would be helpful. The next one is 62%, is preservation and restoration of heritage buildings on both sides. That is that masjids in Charda Punjab and renovation and preservation of old homes of Sikh, Hindu, and Jain buildings in Landa Punjab. That is 60%. About half, or 52%, also would like to see sharing of music from across the divide. That there would be individuals who would share music, that in Landa Punjab, there's a very rich diversity of Punjabi language. I remember the first time I went, I heard Hindko, and I told my friend, you just keep speaking Hindko, and I just want to listen to it. And music and further enriches that. The other one that is more than 55% is documenting the experiences of the partition through oral histories. And as was said earlier, there are 2 primary organizations doing that. One is the 1947 Partition Archive, which a link to which I already put in the chat box. The second is that if you ever go to Lahore, the best kept secret of Lahore is opposite to the Lahore Fort is the National Museum of History. The National Museum of History in Lahore has its primary focus is oral histories on the partition. It is called the Citizen Archives of Pakistan, an amazing place to go look at. So these are the ones that got more than 50% from you all. And there were others, for example, one in terms of decolonized history of Punjab, from the way the British have shown us, is about 33%. About 40% of you talked about deconstructing the imposition of Hindi and Urdu on Punjabi language and culture in Charda and Landa Punjab. So it kind of gives you a sense of looking at the future. So at this time, what I would like to do is invite our panelists. I see that Dr. Akhtar Sandhu, his internet seemed to have gone out, so he probably will be joining us back. I would first like to invite Dr. Ranbir Singh Sandhu. He himself has gone through the partition. He has shared with us some of his more pleasant experiences. Dr. Ranbir Singh, when you hear this input from attendees, what reflections do you have on what are the ways to be able to heal together?
I think the efforts that you are making, that the SCIR is making, it should be fruitful. And I think one thing that people don't notice is that all this madness and misery caused by partition was avoidable, and people made mistakes. And also, very few people understand the role of the British, because they were not as nice as they claim to be. And they say this was a peaceful transition of power. This was a very unpeaceful transition of no power, because it did everything possible to make the two new countries as hostile to each other as possible and as weak as possible, so that India could not rise quickly into prosperity. And both nations have wasted a lot of money on fighting, although there's no need for fighting. And the people on both sides, they would love to be together and live happily ever after. The problem is the majority, like other presenters have said this today, it dominates. And for the minority, it has to either submit to the majority, or the majority has to be liberal enough to let them be as they are. And this was how the cry for Pakistan came up. The British tricked the Indian leaders. They created this communal award that a Muslim would only vote for a Muslim, Hindu for a Hindu, and things like that. This communal separation by law created all these problems. And one of the panelists told us that in the early 20th century, there was a lot of harmony and joint efforts for freedom. How did the whole thing change? We need, I think, another webinar to discuss why Muslim League changed its posture. Dr. Iqbal, who said, "Sare jahan se acha Hindustan hamara," at one time, later on, he had to say, "Sharm aati hai isko watan kehte hue." What caused that? And I think we all need to reflect upon where we went wrong and how to remedy that situation. Thank you.
Dr. Sandhu, at one time when I was in conversation with you, you had mentioned something that has stuck with me, and that is that you expressed the opinion that British, when they had to quit India, really had one objective in mind when they left, and that was to minimize any British casualties. Do you still believe that to be true?
That's exactly true, because if you look at history, actually very few people have read Mountbatten papers. They are very revealing. When Mr. Attlee sent Lord Mountbatten as our viceroy in India, his specific instructions were to prevent the loss of British life. That he wanted that all British citizens should be evacuated properly without harm. And Mountbatten, he did that, and he did that with a big trick. And the trick was, Attlee had given him till June 48 to arrange for separation. He gave India 3 months to do the same. People were confused. There was chaos. And very few people recognized that on 15th August night, all the British officials left. And I don't think many people know that during British times, all senior officials, they had to be British. The number of Indian origin officers was limited to be below 50%. So you can imagine that half of the administration suddenly disappears. There are no handing of charges properly. There are no proper appointments. And in fact, Lord Auchinleck, the Commander-in-Chief, very bitterly argued with Lord Mountbatten that the army cannot be separated so quickly. But he said, we got to do it in 3 weeks. So how can you have hundreds of thousands of soldiers and just tell the Muslims to go to Pakistan and tell non-Muslims to go to India? It just can't happen. And I recall another issue that Governor Trivedi of Punjab asked General Chivney, who was a Major General, to take over the Eastern Punjab to control the mobs. And General Chimney's answer was, Your Excellency, I'm supposed to be a Major General in charge of a division. All I have is 1 battalion. How can I do what you asked me to do with 1 battalion? And if you go further back, I read Lord Wavell's biography, in which he blatantly states that if India is free as one country, they might join with Russia or China, and we must prevent that. I don't know the exact words, but the proposal he made was that we need a state, a buffer state in the northwest, that was Pakistan, that would not be self-sufficient and who would have to depend on us for a long time for support.
Thank
and
you,
that's
Dr.
exactly.
Sorry, Dr. Sandhu, we are out of time. We have to go back to Mr. Munish Singh. Munish, if you could come back kindly onto your screen. And here is my forward-looking question to you, Munish. You and me belong from a generation in which the trauma of the partition has been passed on to you and me, right? So while we look backward, we also look forward. How do we now, in this generation looking forward, wash the bloodstains on this land of 5 rivers in 1947? What are your thoughts?
Sir, my observation is कि सब तो पहला ਤਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਲ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਬਾਹਰ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਪਏਗਾ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਟੋਰੀਜ਼ ਨੇ ਕਮਿਊਨਲ ਹਾਰਮਨੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਸੈਂਚਰੀਜ਼ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਬ੍ਰਦਰਹੁੱਡ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਹਾਈਲਾਈਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਪਏਗਾ ਆਪਣੀ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੀ ਜਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਜਾਣੂ ਕਰਾਉਣਾ ਪਏਗਾ ਤੇ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਕਮਿਊਨਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਫਿਰ ਡੀਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਾਂਗੇ ਅਦਰਵਾਈਜ਼ ਜੇ ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਤੇ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੀ ਸੈਂਚਰੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਫੇਸ ਕਰਨੀਆਂ ਪੈਣਗੀਆਂ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਡੇਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਡੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪਾਵਰ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਹੈਗੀ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਦੀ ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ ਥਰੂ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਕ੍ਰਾਸ ਬਾਰਡਰ ਕਨਵਰਸੇਸ਼ਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਹੈਰੀਟੇਜ ਗਰੁੱਪ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਜੀਵੇ ਸਾਂਝਾ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਜਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਅਦਰ ਐਸੋਸੀਏਸ਼ਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਕ੍ਰਾਸ ਬਾਰਡਰ ਕਨਵਰਸੇਸ਼ਨ ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਕਨਵਰਸੇਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਹੋਣਾ ਪੀਪਲ ਟੂ ਪੀਪਲ ਕੰਟੈਕਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੋਣਾ ਆ ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਆਪਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕ ਮਿਲਣਗੇ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟਸ ਵੀਜ਼ਾਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਾਈਡ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਵਾ ਪਾ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਸੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਇੱਕ ਵੇ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਲੋਕ ਆਪਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਿਲਣਗੇ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਣਨਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਨਫ਼ਰਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਨਿਕਲ ਪਾਵਾਂਗੇ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਖਿੱਤੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਕਨੋਮਿਕ ਸਟੇਬਿਲਿਟੀ ਵੀ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਆਉਣਾ ਪਏਗਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਮੋਸਟ ਆਫ ਦਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਫੰਡਸ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆ ਡਿਫੈਂਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਆਵਾਮ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਫੈਸਿਲੀਟੇਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਪਾ ਰਹੇ सो साडे लई मोर ज़्यादा जरूरी जिहड़ा आ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर आ। इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर तां ही आ पाएगा जे साडे कोल जिहड़ी है इत्थे पीस एस्टैबलिश होएगी इस खित्ते दे विच। सो क्रॉस बॉर्डर कॉन्वर्सेशन जिहड़ी आ बहुत ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है।
Those of you who don't understand Punjabi, what Mr. Munish Singh has summarized for us is one is he believes that there needs to be people-to-people conversation, especially through social media. And people make interactions, get to know each other, that the people on the other side have the same color of blood that, runs in our own veins. So thank you, Munish Singh ji, for those comments. I was looking at the Q&A box. And one is we are out of time. A lot of the questions in Q&A are questions looking backwards, but all the forward-looking questions, pretty much our panelists all actually have been able to do that. So let me begin to close this event. Let me first thank our three speakers, Dr. Hussein Sandu, Professor Munish Singh, and Dr. Ranbir Singh Sandhu for speaking on a topic that is emotionally challenging for so many of us, but one that is so important for us to talk here in a public space. Thank you to each one of you who came and attended through Zoom and Facebook Live. Tomorrow, all Zoom registrants and attendees will receive an email from us, which will have a link to our Facebook page where this webinar is being archived. We will also include any web links that we have listed. That's why it's important, the chat box, if you have any last minute web links you want to provide, we will include those also in our email to you. I also want to state that here at SCIR, we will be doing online webinars every other month, and they will be held on Thursdays at the same time. Our next webinar dates are October 6th and December 1 at the same time on Thursday afternoons. And in the email that you get yesterday, you will receive a copy of these dates. Please come to join us at these gatherings. And at this time, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Assalamu alaikum, namaste, tanwad, and best wishes to everyone. Thank you.